Good afternoon, gladiators. We who are about to play salute you. Today, doing something a little different. I've been a game developer for 25 years, since I was a kid, really. Probably longer. Professionally, since I was maybe 23, 24. And I've made a lot of games. Hundreds, really. Of varying sizes and quality. The more recent games have been my most epic and biggest productions, and the kind of games that take, a year or two to make, and in return have so much in them and tend to bring in more money, and they're serious content. But before I was making these big epic games, I made literally hundreds of Flash games. When I was working for my old company especially, we would bang out Flash games sometimes at the rate of over one a week. Some games only took a couple of days to make. That's how prolific we were in making games, and some of them were really good. Some of them, however, were not. And I thought today we'd go through some of the worst games that I ever made or was involved in. There's actually games that are a lot worse than the ones you see here, but unfortunately they're client games that we made for customers, and I can't really show you them because they got brands and so on. But some of those advert games, as they call them, were absolutely terrible, and if you saw them, you wouldn't be happy. So today instead we're going to go through the top 5 worst Flash games of my game development career. Let's start at number 5. Number 5. Number 5 on the list is one of the very early games that I made when I was building Flash games professionally. This game came out in, I don't know, maybe 2007 or something like that. And it was a collaboration with an artist who was hired, who had some big ideas and fancied himself as a bit of a movie director. But unfortunately, his ideas were better than his art skills. And we sort of together teamed up to make a little game called Prong of the Dead. And my coding wasn't particularly inspired, and the gameplay wasn't particularly inspired. But let's have a look at it, shall we? Prong of the Dead. Move that over there. All right. So, Prong of the Dead is a game where you are in some kind of mangrovey forest, which is actually just a photograph. There's some crappy font there. And, you basically have to kill some zombie prawns. It's a little bit like if you remember those old arcade games like Operation Wolf or Big Buck Hunter and that kind of thing. I guess it's like that. Anyway, let's just play it and see how we go. I can't really remember how to play it, but I remember it being bad. So you move left and right with your cursor, and a little thing comes up and shows you the prawn. Oh, there's a prawn. And you've got different ammo here. You can mow them down, and you got to try and get your brains being eaten over here. I feel like this kind of could have been a good game with decent artwork. Now I've got some kind of holy water. Became a zombie prawn. Let's play again. Give it another go. I don't know. Boiling water. Alright, because you boil the prawns. And there's a net thing which you can fire, which I've just wasted. Where are these prawns? I don't know. It's just... This is basically no better than those banner ad click games where it's, click on this thing, whack-a-mole to win a prize. In essence, it's just boring. And even for a Flash game, it's not a lot to it. I remember at the time kind of feeling a little uninspired building it. I wrote the music to this game, which I ended up using in a number of different games. I can't remember if it was written for this or just used in this game, but I feel like it's actually from another game I made called Ghoul Academy, which is a much better game, which I'll show you another day. But yeah, Prawn of the Dead, what you see here is basically the whole game, except occasionally a prawn will drop like that on the hook. And the artist guy drew a prawn that looked like Michael Jackson. Why? Because Thriller or something like that? I don't know. It's not a good game. Anyway, not a game I'm proud of. And I think a fitting entry into the top 5 worst Flash games of my career. Next up, number 4. Number 4. Number 4 on this list is in fact a sequel to another game that I made. This game, the early game, doesn't warrant an entry in the list because it's such a simple game and it did exactly what it said in the box and it was fine. This game, however, deserves a place because it was a big, bloated affair for something. It's a nothing burger. That's what I like to call it, a nothing burger. This game was made in a time when companies like ours were making large downloadable games and then selling them on their websites, and we thought we'd do the same. Companies like PopCap with Bejeweled and Peggle, of course, and all the hidden object games and that kind of thing. And now we did a few downloadable games ourselves, and some of them were very successful. Of course, Swords and Sandals was one of them. Ex Mortis, which was a horror game series done by a friend of mine, was another. But we wanted more content, and so we tried to make a bunch of games quickly that were, for lack of a better word, uninspired. Now, this next game very much deserves a place on the list because it is exactly that, uninspired. Let's have a look. This game is called Jewel Thief World Tour, and it's the sequel to an earlier game called Jewel Thief, which was fine. You know, it was a simple game. It was all right. However, we decided to turn that into a bigger idea. And the idea is that you are a jewel thief going around the world to India and, you know, the Mayan pyramids and the area there you are at the Kremlin, and that's Parliament House or something. The art for the title screen was done by the unfortunate Tony Lowe, who was a good friend of mine and did the art for Swords and Sandals, but this isn't one of his more inspired efforts. This game was made back in 2006, believe it or not. So you start off here in London, England, collect 20 jewels to proceed to the next level. That already is an uninspired start. Now all you got to do in this game is move your hand around and collect jewels. If you collect 5 of the same type, you'll get a bonus. If you collect 5 of the same shape, you'll get a bonus. Little power-ups appear. 5 rubies. You have to avoid the little wind-up guards. I don't know, everything about this game just screams clip art. It's boring, it's uninspired, kind of looks like a poker machine. I was bored building it. I tried to inject a little life into it with the power-ups, like this bird here, which, you know, makes things different, all the same. So all these things will get some bonuses here, but I don't know, is this the kind of game you want to pay money for? Even back in 2006, it seemed like a bit of a lame duck of an effort. And one of the things I hate the most is working on a game that I don't have a passion for, and it shows. And I think a lot of people get into the games business for the wrong reasons, and that's to make... Oh, we're in jail. And that's to make money. So we need to coin to get out of here, out of this... This toilet block really just sums up the game perfectly, doesn't it? You know, people get into the games business, obviously, sometimes to make a quick buck. And you see examples of this all over the mobile app store. There's this clone after clone after clone. There's not that much more to say about this game. It's boring and it's uninspired. I didn't have fun making it, and it shows. The art isn't great either. And I know that... Anyway, let's just... Oh, we've escaped. let's get back to jail and mercifully end our adventures in Jewel Thief. Come on, rat. There's a rat. Jewel Thief. World Tour. Yeah. A much deserved place on the top 5 worst Flash games of my career. Next up, number 3. Number 3. Number 3 on this list reflects a very tumultuous and challenging time in my career, because this game was made in 2014 and it was only a few months after I had parted ways with my old company under less than auspicious circumstances, and the fallout was still happening, and there's a lot of turmoil going on in my life after being there for so long. I'd started up Whiskey Barrel Studios the year before with the intent to make games for myself, and the first one, of course, was You Are a Knight, which was a big, lavish medieval game, which in fact became Swords and Sandals Medieval some years later. But I also made a few other games along the way to try and myself make a quick buck on the App Store. And I was using Flash to make these games, and so one of the games I made, I actually posted up on Congregate as a Flash game. Now, why this game made the top 5 worst games of my game dev career, it's a mouthful, isn't it, as I keep saying, is because it's a cynical, sad attempt at cashing in on a craze. About a month or two before that, a game had come out called Flappy Bird, and I hated that game, and I hated everything that it represented. The fact that it was making $50,000 a day under shady circumstances for what was essentially a tutorial. You know, it's something that your average high school kid can knock up in 5 minutes. And, you know, there was a hint of jealousy there, more than a hint. But why this game was more deserving than any other game, and why did it make so much money? And then why were there so many other clone games out there within days and days and days making money off the Flappy Bird phenomenon? So about a month and a half later, a game came out called Timberman. Now, Timberman was destined to be the next big Flappy Bird style hit, potentially. And I thought, I'm going to jump on that, and I'm going to make a clone myself and see if I can make a game in a day. Maybe it took me about a day and a half, roughly. And to make a game, get it up on the app stores, both iOS and Android, and see if I could cash in on the whole craze. And so I made a game called Mania, and I put it up on the app stores, and I also put it up on Congregate and maybe even Newgrounds. And I wrote a blog post about it called To Clone or Not to Clone, because it was a big ethical dilemma, because it was a cynical, stupid, it was a bad, cynical thing to do, really. And that's why this is one of the worst games of my career. And let's have a look at it, because it's not a big game at all, and it's only going to take us a minute to play. Mania. Play settings, credits. Look at the credits. There's me. Tony did some art. There's a free, and that's the Whiskey Barrel logo. So that, to my great shame, is an actual Whiskey Barrel Studios production. The aim of the game is to chop down a tree by either clicking on the left of the tree or the right of the tree. And you can click left or click right. Now, I had some characters you could unlock by playing the game more and more and more. Not particularly inspired, but I thought it would add something to the original game, because even at my most cynical, I thought, well, there's got to be something I can do to make this stand out. So here you are. Chop, chop, chop. There's some pa music. You gotta do it quickly, because otherwise the... Yeah, that's the game. You could buy it on iPhone or buy it on Android. Great. Play again. Chop, chop, chop. Chop, chop. You can use the arrow keys as well. It's actually easier with the arrow keys. You know, it's polished. It's fine. I've been building these things for years and years and years and years, and I know how to make a game. And, you know, this has got some... It's fine. This took me a day or so. You know, I've mastered the craft enough that I can bang out something like this quickly, but the point is, why do I bother? I mean, the mobile games stores and the let's turn that music off, it's awful. Yep. You know, the mobile game stores are crowded enough as it is without me adding to the garbage. And I felt like that game in particular was one of my lowest points, professionally and personally. And, you know, the game made a little bit of ad revenue, I gotta say. But to what end? You can't download it anymore. I've taken it off. You can still play it on Congregate if you're interested. But, yeah. Number 3, not a good one. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2. Number 2 on this list is actually a very polished, very playable game. It has nice graphics, good fast-paced gameplay, and, you know, kind of represents one of the nicer looking Flash games that I ever made. Why this is the second worst game of my top 5 list is because I've been bandying the word cynical around a bit. This game is perhaps the most cynical. It was a reskin of a client game that we made for a car company, and we took the car out and replaced it with some kind of cowboy theme. But the big problem with this game, it was trying to cash in on a swine flu panic that was happening during that year. I don't remember what year it was. I should have a look. 2009. Okay, 2009 was when this game came out, and swine flu fever had gripped the world. But, you know, people actually were dying from swine flu, and I guess our company thought it would be funny to be a bit edgy and let's make a game making light of this whole thing. And you see that often, you know, especially on sites like Newgrounds and that, where there'll be a tragedy or something and someone will come out and make a funny game about it. And I guess maybe back in the day that's hilarious, but looking back, this is a dumb thing to do and not something I'm proud of. And it wasn't actually my idea, but I went along with it. And you know, this is for the same company that thought it'd be a great idea to make a game about Steve Irwin the day after he died from a stingray attack. And I was lucky I was able to shout that one down, but this one I was not. And so I built this game, Swine Flu Hamdemic. Let's have a look anyway, but I'm not proud of it. Not at all. Play. Right, so what you see here is Mexican stereotype. You know, it's not great. Not great at all. And you got some, you know, generic Mexican house and some evil pigs you got to try and get over to the US border. You know, you shoot them. I mean, the sense of movement's really nice. I'll give it that. I was getting pretty good at Flash by this point. And there's someone in a hazmat suit. Amigo, you threw your pig. Alright. We'll do it again. You know, there's a guy in this. Yeah, look. I don't know. It's just, what's the point of making games like this? I guess it's some kind of social commentary, but what's the commentary? I don't know. I feel like I realized around about now that these weren't the kind of games I wanted to be making, and I guess this was kind of one of the first steps on the journey of me becoming quite disillusioned with the old place, and I didn't want to make games like this. You know, it's, yeah, not a great game. Anyway, enough said about that. I'm going to now have some honorable mentions before we get to the number 1 worst game that I ever made. Dishonorable mentions. When I said honorable mentions, I actually meant dishonorable mentions, because these games deserve a little bit of dishonor. Because while they're not the worst game that I ever made, they're not great either. They are either uninspired or cynical or just badly done. But here's 2 or 3 games that I don't like, and nor should you. Let's get started with the first of them. Flower Girl. Now, what can I say about this game other than I did the art and I did the graphics? And the music. I used to be into 3D, but I was never that good at it. I put this little background together in a 3D program and photoshopped a bit, and I used a 3D program which was popular at the time called Poser to make the figure of this little girl with a bouquet of flowers. Now, why was I making a game called Flower Girl? Because it was decided that we needed more games for girls, and so the first thing I thought of was like, oh yeah, girls like flowers, they like collecting flowers, let's make a game about a girl who collects flowers. Naive and short-sighted and just a dumb game from a younger version of me who was, a little dumb myself at the time. Let's play. So here's your little girl. You move left and right, and you've got to try and make that bouquet up on the right by collecting the right flower. And she gets all smiley and happy. She dropped it. It has that weird sort of pokey look to it as well, doesn't it? There's something kind of soulless about poser figures and 3D figures that aren't that are tried to look realistic. We ran out of time. Let's play again. Yeah, this is the whole game. It didn't take that long, but it wasn't very good. I think the problem is that you gotta try and make games that inspire you rather than games that you think the world needs. And the problem here was that I wasn't experienced enough or didn't have the foresight enough to think what a game for girls might be. And a game for a girl might be the same as a game for a boy. Who knows? And why does it have to have flowers and little girls and things like that? And I think that was just my naivety at the time. And being in a long-term relationship and eventually getting married and now having a young son myself, I think a lot more about these things and the importance of equality and not pandering to one gender or another in particular. And you'll notice in the more recent Swords and Sandals I've tried to bring more female characters, more diverse characters to the game. It's things that you don't think about that much as a young person, but as you get older you just start realizing that don't have to make games like this that are just stereotypical and tedious. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just not a game that the world really needed. So that's dishonorable mention number 1. Dishonorable mentions. The second dishonorable mention is a game that I've already made a video about in my Oli Plays series, and that game is, of course, Gross Out, The Battle for Sludge Valley. For an in-depth look at this game, check that video out. I'm not going to do a long play of this because I've already covered my thoughts on it, but we'll get into it and I'll talk a little bit about why it's one of my least favorites. Right, this is a game that we made together with some guy who had a series of cards which were like the Garbage Pail Kids, and they were kind of trying to crack the games market by having a computer game with their characters. The reason I disliked this game so much is because it used the Swords and Sandals engine, and it was just a cheap attempt to cash in on our the Swords and Sandals engine with a different property that didn't work with it, rather than building a completely new game that suited it. This is just it's a really boring version of Swords and Sandals with newspapers and wet farts and Poochie the Wonder Dog like characters, and it's loud, it's obnoxious. I don't know. I mean, the funny thing is I still get emails now and again asking if I made this game and where can I find it. Some people did like it for some reason. You know, little kids kind of like all that stuff, but for me it was like I felt mad that Swords and Sandals, which I'd worked so hard on, was being reskinned as this, which just, I hated the characters, I didn't like the settings, everything about it felt obnoxious, and you know, it's well put together, I guess. I like the parallax scrolling, and I did try to polish as much as I can, but in the end, you can't polish a turd, and so that's what this game was. You see that over there? That's you, that is. That turd is you, gross out Sludge Valley. And we never heard from that guy again, so I never really found out what happened to the gross out cards. Has anyone ever heard of them? Who knows? Maybe they went on to great things. Certainly it wasn't because of me or that game. So yeah, not a great one. Dishonorable mentions. Well, the final dishonorable mention for today, because believe it or not, there are more games that I could put here, and I wish I could show you some of the client ones because they were a disaster. But the final one in the games that I made or had a hand in making is a game that I built with a colleague and friend of mine, a very, very good friend, one of my very best friends, a guy called Silas Rowe. We built this game together, but I believe the reason this is a dishonorable mention is because it was beyond our skill set at the time. We tried to make a skiing game, and it just didn't work. Let's have a look at it. Trick Mountain, with a Clip Hardy looking character there. I don't remember who did the art for it, but it certainly wasn't their finest hour either. Now, the idea of this game is that you... some awful graphic design there, but you choose a slope, and then you ski down, and you can jump and do tricks. It had a real sort of X Games vibe to it, you know, not in a... That's it, and then you collect these power-up orbs, and there's a way to, like... But it just feels clunky, and... I think we were ambitious in what we wanted to make, but we just didn't have the skills to make it. We programmed the game together, and I did the awful poser figure art, the 3D model for the character. And he will argue about this because he is a proud man, but we definitely missed the mark on this. Maybe he'll agree with me. It's been so long. This game was made 12 years ago, you know, in the early days of Flash. And it runs fast, but it's just... It's dull. You can literally sit there and do that and go down the hill. My hands aren't controlling it. And you can sort of do tricks, but I don't remember what the button is. There's a button. There you go. Crash. Look at that. Really crudely animated trick. Yeah, this is a dishonorable mention because it's a boring game. Boring game. The opposite of the X Games. Yeah, anyway. You win, great. You win, but you really lose when playing Trick Mountain. Alright, are you ready for it? Number 1 is coming up. Number 1. Finally, we come to it. The very worst game that I was ever involved in making is a game that I'll tell you in one moment, but I need to set a little background for. This is a game so bad that 4 or 5 programmers worked on it, several artists, and over 6 months development time was involved in making this debacle of a game. It came out at a time when PopCap's game Peggle was sweeping the world, which was like a pachinko machine game, which is the Japanese style ball games where you shoot little metal balls down and they bounce off other little metal things, almost like a pinball machine, and land in various spots. Peggle Peggle was very colourful. It had a wonderful soundtrack and had quite an addictive quality, and rightfully so, it did very well. Our less than inspired idea was to copy this game. Now, someone in the company had the great idea to go, oh, Peggle's a hit. What about we took Peggle and turned it upside down? Genius. And so Double Bubble was born. And it's just a dull game. Let's have a look and I'll talk you through it. Double Bubble. Boil and trouble. Yeah, so this game, I did probably a week, maybe 2 weeks programming on it because the original programmer had gotten so upset with the game that he ended up resigning. Not specifically just for this game, but it was so stressful to him that he walked away from it. And I believe later on he actually walked away from programming in general and is now a project manager and much happier for it. This game drove him mad. He spent so long coding his own physics engine for the little bubbles, but forgot to make the game fun. And there were constant meetings about why isn't this fun? What can we do to make it fun? But the reality was, it was never going to be fun because you took the thing that made Peggle fun and you removed it. Let's have a look. Nice enough art. Yeah, a little generic, but it's fine. There's an island here. There's lots of levels. There's heaps of levels. This was a downloadable game as well. It's a Flash game that you could buy for something like $20 or something, which, you know, prohibitive at any time. Why this game isn't fun? Collect balls of each color in 90 seconds. Peggle, you aimed, and it was all about where you aim to bounce the balls into a moving cup. But the genius idea to turn the game upside down and make them bubbles, and you move the cup, forgot one fundamental aspect of why the Peggle was fun. It took the aiming out. So all you do is you move this thing here left and right until the numbers. If I get a 9, it goes down to 9 on the blue. If I get an 8, it goes down to 8. Look at all this impressive physics work. This wasn't with no physics engines. Someone built all this, and the bubbles behave quite accurately as they move on up the screen. But you know what? This is the entire game. This was 6 months, and there's something like 30 levels or something of various configurations of this. But that's it. It's so very, very dull. Staggeringly dull. And I spent a couple of weeks on this trying to make it more fun, and I don't know what I tried to do. Oh look, Double Bubble, you've got Double Bubble, so now things come out faster and you hear some fancy music. But it's still the same damn game, even with some flashing lights and pokey style music. I composed the music for this game, so I guess, let's play again. So I had a hand in this. I'm not innocent. That's the whole game, and I can't believe after so many meetings and so much backwards and forwards, there wasn't a way to make this game fun because it forgot the fundamentals of what made Peggle fun. It's not this Double Bubble carry on because you're still not doing anything. My hands are up here and look, I'm collecting. It's just a tedious game. It's so boring, and it should have been wrapped up in a couple of weeks. The lesson here is something isn't working. You prototype it, and then you move on. You don't try to polish a turd. This is a slimy undersea turd of a game, and you know, it's just awful. This game is so bad that I included it in Swords and Sandals as a collectible. I put one of the characters in the game had made a game called Double Bubble, and it tried to lose all the copies of it, and you had to rescue them from a dungeon or something. It became a bit of a running in joke between a lot of friends that used to work at this old place, and we all laugh about it now as the worst game that we ever made together. And looking back now, it's so very dull. It's hilariously dull. If you win this level, you go on to the next one, and that's all that happens. I think maybe the little pegs move around a bit, but that's it. That's Double Bowl. That is hands down the worst game I was ever involved in, even though I wasn't the main programmer. I did a little bit of work and I did the music for it. I'm just ashamed that I had anything to do with it, and so should everyone else who worked on this be or thought of the great idea behind the game, because it wasn't a great idea at all. It was a debacle, and I hope we all learned something from that. There are many more games that I've made that aren't great. Some that I finished, some that I didn't finish, some that I released, and some that never saw the light of day. You never know if a game's going to be good or not when you make it. You have to have the courage to abandon a game if it's not working. You have to have the courage to know that cloning other popular ideas isn't necessarily a good idea as a quick cash grab. You have to have the courage to put some heart into a game and make it your own. And if you don't have the will, the energy, or the skills to do that, maybe you're in the wrong industry. It sounds like a negative video, but I want it to feel like a positive in some ways, in that I made a lot of bad games, but I also learned from them. And with every one of these games, I know what I did wrong, and years later I can look back and go, yeah, I learned from that, and I didn't make that mistake again. Of course I made new ones, and I still make new mistakes, but the key element that I try to stress in the games I make now is that I want them to feel fun and not derivative. I want them to be original and feel like when you're playing a Whiskey Barrel Studios game, you're playing a game by Oliver Joyce, and that should stand for something. It should be a hallmark of quality and of originality and heart, basically. So for those who are watching this who are game developers, I hope you learned something. I've been making games for many, many years, and I'm not perfect. And I hope that you had a laugh, because these are some of the worst things I've ever built and were involved in. And we've all done stuff like that. Anyway, now I'm rambling a bit, but have a great weekend. The next video I'm going to make for you coming up will be, it might be another game, but I'm also going to do the top 5 best Flash games that I ever made. And that's a much happier video, because there is some good stuff that I'm very proud of. This is outside of the Swords and Sandals series, of course, because that is my favorite game that I ever made. But there are some other little gems that you may not know about. All right, enjoy your weekend, and bye for now. Don't play Double Bubble!